The Dallas Cowboys will open the 2025 season against the hated Philadelphia Eagles as they will drop their Super Bowl championship banner at the link, and the Cowboys will be there 7:20 Central, Thursday, September 4th in Philly. That will be the week one kickoff game on NBC and streaming on Peacock. You can also catch it on 105.3 The Fan. Of course, we'll have the pregame and postgame. Zach Wolchuk, along with the Super Bowl winning scout, Brian Broaddus. Happy to be back. Brian, I first saw this news and was thinking, well, I mean, every year you get a Sunday night Cowboys-Eagles game. The NFL really need to go ahead and just blow this one early here. You know those ratings are going to be great, but this might be the highest rated game of the entire season out of the gate.
No, and it's always unique and interesting to go and play in Philadelphia. And there's such a hate, if you want to say, between these two. Well, I should say this. I've worked on both sides of this thing. I think the fan bases hate each other more than I think there's respect. I think that Howie Roseman and them respect Will McClay. I think Will McClay respects Howie Roseman and that crew. I think there's a lot less of that among the front office, whereas the fan bases, no, there's some serious. I know in a couple different platforms, I do the We're Doing All Right podcast with Voch Lombardi.
Mm-hmm.
I go in to read comments. There were Philadelphia fans in there because we had talked about where Brown and Smith were relation to Pickens and Lamb.
Mm-hmm.
And it's this whole big thing. I really don't remind respectful back and forth, but man, our side can make it mean. Their side can make it mean. I think the fan bases are really, really fired up. And I think that, NBC is looking at it as like, okay, let's kick this thing off the right way. Let's get a massive number and then kind of work from there. But you have so many great storylines really for both teams, with the Eagles coming off the Super Bowl, the Cowboys making a coaching change, the addition of some players. Can the Eagles with Saquon Barkley, can they maintain, that offensive firepower that they had last year? How will they play on defense? Is Dallas better now on offense? Dak Prescott coming off injury. A lot of great storylines leading up to this one.
Yeah, and Dak balled out in 2021. That last time the Cowboys played in this Thursday night season opener was against the defending champion Buccaneers. Cowboys did lose 31-29, but Dak and the offense with CD, they were absolutely brilliant. Unfortunately, Tom Brady did what Tom Brady does late in that game. The Bucs were able to get it. But, I mean, typically we've seen if the Cowboys are starting the season against a division rival, it's the Eagles. This is the first time, and I know you're going to remember this game well, Brian, since the Pickle Juice game, 2000 at the old Texas Stadium, where the Eagles did the onside kick to start the game. Cowboys went on to lose 41-14. It was Dave Campo's first game as the Cowboys head coach. This will be Brian Schottenheimer's first game as the Cowboys head coach. Cowboys coaches 2-4 in their season openers in Cowboys history. Yeah, Jason Garrett losing his debut in 2011. But man, that I think that 2000 Pickle Juice game and a little Zach Wolchuk watching that, I think that was the moment that the Eagles took over and forever have been my most hated division rival.
No, you're absolutely right about that. It was I never remember a game ever being that hot. And I grew up here in Dallas, Texas, much like you did or have. And I just, in going to games for 20 odd years before that. And you mentioned it was Dave Campo's first game. I'd started back with the Cowboys in 1999. And so it was really my second season. I'd done work in Philadelphia. A lot of the guys that we drafted were playing in that game. Unfortunately for us, if you remember, Joey Galloway got hurt in the game. And, here we'd traded for, the 2 first-round picks for him. We lose him, with the game kind of out of hand. We lose him to a knee injury for the season. and that was really kind of the downfall of, if you're going to say an opening day was a downfall for the Dave Campo administration, and you've heard me say this a bunch, Zach, we didn't do a very good job. We just did not do a very good job with our personnel, and we weren't well coached. We didn't do, like I say, on our end of it, we didn't pick good enough players. So yeah, it was a 3-year, it was the beginning of a 3-year slide, actually, for and a really a dark time for Dallas Cowboys football. But that Eagles, that Andy Reid, Andy is just went on, as you said, that the draft that we were able to have, drafting Donovan McNabb, being able to get Andy Reid as your head coach, just a lot of things going for Philadelphia in a positive way. As you said, they were on the way up, and we were clearly on our way down.
Yeah, it was really the Eagles' time there as they went to 4 straight NFC championships. They went to that Super Bowl, T.O. famously playing on the broken leg. They lose to New England. Now they've won a couple of Super Bowls, and they are the standard, which really pains us to say as we look up at them here in the NFC East and in the NFC. But this is going to be a great test to open the season. I mean, you broke it down. I mean, there's going to be so many juicy talking points we'll get to do on Love of the Star, on the G-Bag Nation, on 105.3 The Fan, throughout all of our platforms here. I mean, you and Vaj going down, Pickens and CeeDee Lamb now. Cowboys legit have a solid 1-2 punch at wide receiver. How does that compare with, Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown? Then you've got the rookie, Tyler Booker. He's going to get to make his first start against Jalen Carter, against Jordan Davis, that Alabama-Georgia rivalry right there. Who starts at left tackle? Is it Tyler Guyton? Does Tyler Guyton earn that job, which the Cowboys are hoping that he does? And how does he go and fare in that game? And then you've got some outstanding rookies the Eagles drafted as well. Andrew Makuba, who I know a lot of people locally are big fans of. If you're a Texas Longhorn fan, we loved him coming out of the draft. I mean, how does some of these young rookies come out and play? And then, of course, the debut of Brian Schottenheimer. How's the offense look? The running back position, what ends up happening there? Jaden Blue just finalizing his 4-year contract with the Cowboys. There's going to be a bunch of fun stuff leading into this one, Brian.
Yeah, that's the great thing about the National Football League. And every year the draft brings hope. And, the Cowboys, we feel like I think the Cowboys had a really nice off season. Was it one of those where, is it going to be the kind that you remember like, oh, this changed the direction? I think that they really did a nice job of adding some players, whether it's the linebackers, whether it's getting Fowler back. We'll see what happens at the cornerback spot. Is Gilmore still in the picture somehow, some way here? Are they going to look at his situation and say, all right, man, we're going to need another corner here? They're going to monitor what happens with Ravel, talking to people in the organization. They're super excited about Ravel's attitude and how he's been working so far. Everything is a go on that. I've seen clips of Diggs working with a doctor, trainer, talk about, is it with Britt Brown? I'm really, really partial to Britt Brown. I think, I've known Britt since 1999, and I'm of the utmost respect for how he puts players back together and gets them on the field. But as long as Diggs is doing everything he can to get ready, and be, because last year it wasn't. We've talked about that a bunch on the various platforms we've been on, that he didn't take the rehab as seriously as he needed to. Jerry Jones even came out and said that. So there's a lot of things that are going to happen, and the kick in the fact that the Eagles are now going to prepare for a staff that basically is brand new. Is that an advantage? We've talked about that a little bit while you were gone, Zach. Is it an advantage for the Cowboys to play the Eagles in week 1?
Yeah.
And be able, like the Eagles are like, okay, we know what Matt Eberflus is, but how will he use Micah Parsons? How will he use Fowler? How will he use Bland? The linebackers. How is he going to use? And then with Schottenheimer now being the primary play caller, well, the talk all year off season has been about running the football and how to run the football. And you go out and you get coaches that have a history of running the football, and you have you go out and get coaches that have different scheme ideas. So these all present challenges, for the Eagles, for their crew and having to get ready. And how did the Eagles, transfer from Kellen Moore now going to the Saints?
Sure.
So everything is kind of a lot of, there's a lot of teams that have this question now. Are the Lions going to be as good without their coordinator? Are the Eagles going to be as good as without their coordinator? There's a lot to really like about the season and getting it started.
You brought up the Cowboys offseason. Let's talk more about that. We've got more George Pickens reaction from Stephen Jones. The schedule release will be tonight, so we'll be back Friday. We'll do a full breakdown on Love of the Star of the new Cowboys schedule. We only know the
actually it's Wednesday, isn't it?
Right now,
is it Wednesday?
Yes, it is. It is tomorrow night. We're recording this on a Tuesday.
Yeah.
So, and the leaks will come. We'll get some of the leaks out. We don't have any so far of the Cowboys. I did think they might get one of those London games. I was bummed. I thought that October 12th matchup against the Jets, they're not getting that.
They didn't want to give it up. Jets didn't want to give it up. So the Cowboys will make 2 trips to the Meadowlands this year, for the Giants and then, for the Jets. Just the ownership there just did not want to give up the possibility. They see what happens when the Cowboys play the Giants. That's ticket sales right there. The East Coast Cowboy fans do a great job of showing up at MetLife and being a vocal part of that game. And the Jets say, listen, we're not willing to give up that gate, even though we'll probably get maybe outnumbered here in some instances, but they want to make sure that they play that game at their home place.
You are listening to the Love of the Star podcast. Love of the Star is an Odyssey podcast. You can find it on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts. Brian Broaddus along with Zach Wolchuk. And Brian, this offseason, now you add in the trade with George Pickens.
Yeah.
It might be the most active that I think the Cowboys have been in an offseason since, 2010, when they came off a really good 2009 season. Now, some of the moves that they made that offseason clearly didn't work out. It was a very much all-in offseason. They're bringing in Pac-Man Jones, Tank Johnson, Zach Thomas towards the end of his career, right? But this is, not a ton of – the George Pickens was a wow move. That was an all-in type of move that they just made.
Yeah.
But a lot of stuff that they've done here, just filling out the roster. When you look at bringing in Solomon Thomas, who we like a lot, maybe you're able to get a healthy Peyton Turner, the edge rusher, whom was a high first-round draft pick, Jack Sanborn and Kenneth Murray at linebacker, bringing back Dante Fowler Jr. as another edge rusher. You trade for Joe Milton, so now you're excited about maybe some possibilities of backup quarterback. Obviously, with the draft that we've broken down in length and re-signing Osa Odighizuwa, you look at where the Cowboys roster is now, and I do think they've put themselves in a really good spot where this can be a very competitive football team. Do I think they're a Super Bowl team? No. But they are in a much better position to compete in the NFC today than when they ended their season back in January. And I'll give them a ton of crap. I will. And I'll be critical. And they deserve every bit of that. But I got to say, this offseason, I'm happy. And I think that George Pickens move as well, even if, hey, we can talk about that, my feelings on it in a moment. But even I got to tip the cap. They had a weakness. And they were aggressive. They addressed it and said, you know what? We're going to fill out the rest of our roster to the best of our abilities. Let's attack this thing. Let's put the best product on the field.
It could have been very easy for them just to sit on their hands and try and get the Micah Parsons deal done. But, and then say, okay, we're going to draft and we're going to take these picks and make it work. But I thought they really, as you mentioned, Zach, their ability to take picks and move around and swap picks for players and stuff. And, Matt Eberflus, now the coordinator, identifies Sanborn as a linebacker. Sanborn doesn't get re-signed by the Bears. Kind of curious, because it looked like to me he was a productive young player that maybe you should have tendered. You should have thought about bringing him back, but they don't. We'll see what happens with Murray at linebacker. When you watched him play the couple of spots where he was around the football. He was a physical presence in the middle of that defense. You hope that he gives you the tackles that, you had from Eric Kendricks, that type of active, but this guy is a very, very physical player. And so that's your hope right there. To go out and make the Pickens deal, it's just a tremendous, get for the Cowboys. And, you kind of wonder, well, okay, do you ever have a chance to get guys like that? Maybe not. And not for the price that they got him for, just because the fact that, hey, maybe the Steelers didn't want to pay him $28 million a year.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the fact it is he is a pain in the ass to them in the locker room. Everything that I've heard talking to Pittsburgh people, that doesn't be the case at all. It's just, hey, time to move on. Sometimes these things work, sometimes they don't. But that's kind of where they're at. I never hear anything negative or bad about him. I think it's a good trade for the Cowboys, and I think you're going to get the best version of Pickens, George Pickens, because George Pickens is going into a contract year. With David Mulugeta, his agent, a very talented agent. He's probably telling George, listen, if we're going to get this deal, you're going to have to play your ass off, but you're also going to have to make sure that you don't show your ass. You know what I'm saying? So he's probably in that situation where, there's probably going to be a game where he's, Cowboys, it's not going well and he might lose it. And, it's just the competitive nature he lives with. But yeah, I think you're going to get the absolute best version of George Pickens, because if in fact that he has to go on, nobody's going to bring on a problem. Nobody wants to pay a problem $28 million a year. Nobody's going to want to do that, but if you show that you can come in, you can work with everybody, you could be competitive, you could be coachable, all those things, you're good off the field. Those teams will say, wow, Dallas did a great thing for George Pickens. He looks like he matured. We could pay him, that kind of thing. And Dallas might want to pay him. I think Dallas, if I'm Todd Williams, Ada Pacifica, Stephen Jones, I am trying my damnedest to sign others so I could keep that franchise tag safe in case I have to use it on George Pickens. George Pickens might not like it, but it might buy me some time to be able to do some negotiating with him. There's some people that say, hey, you ought to offer him right now and see if you could get the deal. We kind of know that's not the Cowboys' way of operating. We're going to get into Stephen Jones' comments here in a little bit. He's going to talk about Micah Parsons. He's going to talk about crystal balls. He's going to talk about, I never know what to look into, that kind of thing. We know they're going to get the Micah Parsons deal done. He'll probably be at the max number over $40 million. It'll probably be right before training camp or at training camp, and it will be in line with Max Crosby and Myles Garrett. That we just kind of know that's where it's going to be. Sure. So that's the crystal ball. But they need to make sure that, okay, got Micah done. How about Bland? How about Smith? There's guys that need to get done. And if you could keep that franchise tag open, that gives you the flexibility that if, in fact, Pickens has a great year for you, you could just tag him, or negotiate with him. But it gives you that protection for at least 1 year. You can maybe get something done with him, that it's just not a one and done with him as well.
Right. And you mentioned maturity, and I know you guys have probably been breaking this down all week. I mean, I'm on the boat and we get this thing with Pickens. I'm like, oh my gosh, are you freaking kidding me? Maybe I need to go out of town more often and we can get some great breaking Cowboys news here. But so now I'm waiting on, wifey and the baby to get ready for dinner. And so I'm just scrambling. I'm talking to Chris Halleck and Mully, some other guys that I've become friends with there in Pittsburgh. And the maturity was the thing that just kept coming up.
Sure.
It's not like he's a bad guy and he wants to win. I think that was the clear thing to me.
That's what I've heard. That's what I've heard. He just wants us to win. Yeah.
I wondered if did George Pickens fit what Shoddy was trying to build with the culture? But the one thing that does fit is the guy loves football and he wants to win and he's competitive. And I think similar to, and this is why you get the Dez Bryant comparison. One, I think, is the maturity and the fact that Dez Bryant was constantly late and missing meetings, right? That was a Dez thing. Dez didn't really own an alarm clock. He didn't know how to tell time. George Pickens apparently is very similar to this. Late to meetings, late to flights. I think he actually missed a flight is what I was told totally last year, had to fly himself to a game. And look, we've seen a guy like Kyrie Irving totally just transform his reputation and how people view him by a change of scenery. Nobody wanted Kyrie. He was basically viewed as damaged goods. He went to two teams in Boston and Brooklyn, and it was terrible. And I was nervous as hell when the Mavs traded for him. I think we've got to keep an open mind and give George Pickens a clean slate. Does it make me nervous when a Mike Tomlin, who's put up with a ton of various personalities and characters, punts on a wide receiver like this. It does. Because the ones that he's moved on from, it's been the right move. Whether it was Juju Smith-Schuster, Deontay Johnson, Antonio Brown, Martavis Bryant, there's a list of guys the Steelers have kind of had a pretty good eye for. This is no longer worth keeping around here. So maybe the Cowboys do have the infrastructure in place, but part of having the leadership group, and I think Vach and you have talked about this, and I loved what Vach said, when you have a guy like Dak Prescott, you haven't heard of a lot of the bad blood and people not liking each other on the offensive side of the football. We kept the tank and Micah stuff under wraps. We've known about that for a few years.
Sure.
But the bad blood really seemed like it was on the defensive side, where I don't know if they've had a true leader. You don't have to worry about that on offense with number 4 here. So George Pickens is coming into a situation where it's established, and maybe this is perfect for him to go ahead and succeed. The talent is there. There's no question about it. He's an incredible compliment to CeeDee Lamb. You just got to figure out the maturity stuff with him. And when it comes to knocking guys for just being emotional, I think Dez Bryant got a bad rap about that his entire career. Yeah. I hated that for Dez. The Detroit game is one that I'll always point to, where the broadcast on Fox is making it seem like he is being a complete diva and yelling and screaming at his teammates and his coaches. When you go back and the NFL Films is released, all he's doing is pumping up everybody. Right. He's like, hey, the fade. Romo, we're the best in the league on that, and I think Pickens has a little bit of that to him as well. But where he can cost you games is when he loses cool and he draws a personal foul. We saw that with Jordan Lewis in that game in Pittsburgh. That needs to be something that he is able to control his emotions and grows out of. But I'm excited about it. Hey, worst case scenario, maybe somebody does want to offer him $30 million a year and you get a 3rd-round comp pick, or you get a 4th-round comp pick.
Yeah.
To me, it's a move that's worth it, even if it's a year. If they give him a long-term deal, I'm scared that could turn out like a Diggs move or something like that, where maybe you don't get the reward on that. But either way, for a team that I don't think that they've done all-in stuff, this is an all-in type of move to compete and go win the NFC if they can do it.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's a move that a general manager makes when he has job security.
Yep,
it's
100%.
Yeah.
And so Stephen Jones's comments with Mad Dog Serious Sports, quote, he reminds a lot of us in our building of Dez in terms of his competitiveness and what he brings to the field, his edge. As I said, we were looking at the draft as a way to look at filling that need. When it didn't happen, we had some opportunities around the league that we were looking at, and this one at the end of the day made the most sense. I love it. He said again, he's a competitor. We had one in Dez who was the same way. He just couldn't get enough. And boy, when the lights come on and his cleats hit the turf, he was a different guy. And it feels like George is going to be that way.
Totally agree. I totally agree with him. I think, Tim, you watch George Pickens play, you could see it's important to him, and you could see by the way he plays. Does he get frustrated? Does he get mad? Does he get all the above? Sure. A lot of players do. A lot of these wide receivers do. When things are not going great. I mean, maybe the only guy I've ever seen that when things aren't going great, he just kind of keeps the same demeanor is like a Larry Fitzgerald. He just kind of keeps, he played on a lot of bad football teams. But see, that's the thing about with this guy is he is so competitive and he wants to win first and foremost. And we'll see. I believe with my whole heart that we are going to get the best version of this guy. Listen, if I was working for the Cowboys, I would volunteer to go. If I was in football ops, I'd volunteer every day to go pick George Pickens up for work. I'd go pick him up and then I would take him home. And I would say, hey, listen, man, on Tuesdays, if you want to do charitable stuff, I'll pick you up and take you to those places. I just make sure that George Pickens maybe needs to learn how to be a pro. I thought the same thing about Dez Bryant when he was drafted. One of my really good friends, Steve Karakoff, who was in football ops for Jimmy Johnson, brought him. He's a 2-time Super Bowl winner, actually 3-time Super Bowl winner with the Cowboys. And Steve was very much when we were talking about Dez Bryant, it was Steve volunteered to say, hey, I will go get him. I will bring him to practice. I will bring him to take him home afterwards. I'll make sure that, even live with the guy, whatever you have to do to get him to learn how to be a pro. That's what you need to do. The maturity questions and stuff like that. This guy's not a domestic violence guy or a guy you have to worry about with some type of abuse of
Mhm.
substance or things like that. His drug is playing football. And so that's where, but we have to make sure, he's doing his work. We got to make sure he's at the facility, that he's not late, that he's not a distraction. I don't think that will happen. We'll see. I mean, we'll get through the season in like week 9. You and I will start hearing some whispers. And I hope the whispers aren't, man, this dude's missing meetings.
Yeah.
He's not paying attention, I think all this guy wants to do is win, but the Cowboys have got to find a way to make sure that they're winning.
Yeah, and look, if it doesn't work out, hey, he goes somewhere else, and you get a comp pick out of it, but you gave it a go for this year. Let's get into the Dean Julia mailbag. You are listening to the Love of the Star podcast. The Love of the Star is an Odyssey podcast you can find on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts. As always, you can follow us on Twitter at Zach Wolchuk, at Brian Broaddus. That is Brian with a Y, by the way. All right, don't forget about that. But I put out the tweet. Hey, what do you guys want to know? You got Cowboy questions, Dean Julia mailbag style. And the first one here from Ray of Hope, talking about the season opener. A little bit of a troll question here, Brian.
Sure.
How many sacks does Jalen Carter have on Tyler Booker in the first game of the season?
Well, I think the one thing that you could do is Tyler Booker, if they want to, they could double Carter.
Yeah.
They could try. I mean, Carter's a tremendous football player, a lot of power. The thing with Booker, I think that we'll have to see when in training camp, there'll be, how does he play against a guy with quickness like an Oso Digizua? Maybe we'll get some one-on-one stuff. We'll start to see some of that. We didn't always see that. Or maybe they'll work against the Rams or the Chargers, and we'll get to see some more of that. We had an idea of maybe some stuff that Guyton was dealing with last year when he was playing against Verse. It kind of you get a little bit exposed, like, oh geez, this is about to happen. But I think with Carter, I think him, Booker, that's just two very powerful guys matched up against each other. And could there be a breakdown inside? Sure, absolutely. I think you worry about breakdowns on the edges more than you worry about breakdowns in the middle of your offense, because you have the ability to slide protection. Usually sometimes on the edges, either you chip it or you space it. There's things you could do on the outside. A little harder though to always kind of win on the inside, but that's power versus power right there. That's gonna be a great matchup.
I love this question from Jacob Stanton, and I don't know if you'll have any initial thoughts on this one. We might have to kind of get into the season to find out, but our last two head coaches, Jason Garrett, Mike McCarthy, never seemed to master the clock management and timeouts. Any idea if you think Shoddy has some help upstairs, or if he'll just be better overall at trying to master some of that in-game stuff?
Well, you always worry about the first-time head coach, and you worry about the guy who's the primary play caller and the head coach, and then also managing what's going on defense. One of the reasons why you hire a guy like Dan Quinn or a Mike Zimmer or Matt Eberflus is because you have faith that they can make sure that, where you're going to manage for the defense is if all of a sudden they come out in a formation that you haven't seen, and now there's substitution problems. Do you bang that timeout to help your defense? That's kind of where you kind of help your defense with clock management stuff. Personnel. Are you sending 12 guys on? Are you short one? What's the situation? Hey, call timeout. Let's get this settled down. So you have to pay attention to that part of things. I'm always interested in clock management stuff when it comes to pertains to coaches. But yeah, there's times where you lose track of where you are in the field. You might lose track of the game situation a little bit. Maybe you're looking down at your play sheet and something happens that you're not, fully ready to go on. So, you could always, every team has somebody where, like I say, Bill Parcells had a guy named Ray Hanley, who was the running backs coach. Ray Hanley could look at the clock and say, Bill, you've got to run 7 plays. You've got to get 1 first down. You've got to, okay. When they have no timeouts, this is how you do it. This is how you milk it. I think a lot has, with the analytics folks and stuff, I think a lot has kind of stepped in about game management. Some of the best coaches in the league, Andy Reid, not particularly a great game manager at times with timeouts. At least early in his career, he wasn't. There were times where he was burning timeouts for unnecessary reasons and stuff like that. But you have to have an understanding and a feel for the game. And so with Shoddy, he's been on the field with Mike McCarthy. He's been in a lot of NFL settings with other teams, with Pete Carrolls and people like that. I'm sure he has his own idea of how he wants to handle those things.
Do you, and I might be putting you on the spot here. Do you remember if his dad, Marty, was considered like a good game manager? You think he learned some stuff from his dad in that regard?
I remember, because I just remember Marty. With Marty, it was such a physical presence with his team, whether he was with the Browns in the eight, I believe he came from Kansas City and then Brown. But he's as an assistant. I think it started with the Brown. I'm trying to get his whole history, but it's always been tough football teams. The Browns, the Chiefs. Even when he was the Commanders coach for 1 year, extremely tough team. The Chargers, extremely tough team, physical team and stuff like that. So his way of controlling games and stuff was trying to run the football. That was something that was really prevalent to him. I don't remember Marty Schottenheimer, and maybe we could go back to those games in Cleveland that they lost to Denver where they had the fumbles and the drive, and maybe they left John Elway too much time. I'm sure there's probably something that we could look at and say, well, damn, if Cleveland would have just done this, if they would have just done this, they wouldn't have given the Broncos enough time, So, but yeah, it's not putting me on the spot, but I don't have a great answer saying is one guy is he like his dad, better than his dad. I think his experiences kind of mold who you are than the coaches he's been with.
All right, Wink Marvel asking, do you think the front office is still looking to add any veteran players through free agency or even another trade? I saw the running back stuff still floating around. I don't. That makes no sense to me, Brian. I don't know if you have anything new on that front.
Yeah, I do. I think there's a couple of people that had tweeted out about running backs. I'm trying to think of who. I know Jane Slater was one, and I know there was some others. My apologies. But the thing about it is that I'd asked, I've said, hey, are you out of the running back market? And I got the yes answer. Yes, they're out. So I'm interested to see what happens June 1. Is somebody going to put somebody out there? Or is a defensive tackle going to get put out there? Is there another runner that's going to get put out there? Right now, I think trading for a guy is probably out. Adding a guy after, say, June 1 could very well be an end. I think they like to always tell us they're a 24/7 personnel department. Up until this year, that was kind of lip service. Yeah. This off season, they were really a 24/7 personnel department. So if somebody becomes available June 1 that makes sense, I could see that being an addition.
If there was a corner, and you brought up Gilmore earlier.
I think Gilmore, possibility.
Yeah. And would that be one, maybe like even last year we saw, okay, they're bringing in guys to work out. That would kind of be, you're monitoring the health of Diggs and Ravel and just kind of, how are these guys going to be early in the season? Do we need to add more bodies possibly to play against the Eagles week 1?
Yeah, I think so. I think that, to me, that you're looking at a situation where you might have to, depending on the health of your players, you're definitely going to have to look at that.
Okay. All right. It is the Love of the Star podcast. We love you. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. Always wrapping up with that Dean Julia mailbag. You can join us there. Make sure you like, you follow, you subscribe. Thank you so much to Pepe, Peyton Russell, of course, Eric Chiafalo, who bounces in here, co-host. Again, big shout out to Bobby Belt for breaking that George Pickens news there, Brian. That was outstanding. Love the Star is an Odyssey podcast. You can find on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcast. We've got the schedule release coming Wednesday. We will do a full breakdown. We'll be back with you on Friday. Me and Brian will look over all of the schedule for you. So much to get into. It never stops. Thank you so much. I'm Zach Wolchuk. He's a Super Bowl winning scout, Brian Bross. Until next time, hugs and hand pounds, everybody.